This is Vet with a Mic, content driven by veteran issues. So today we're going to talk about a sticky little concept known as stress. Stress, by all metrics that we can evaluate it, is terrible. It is terrible for you pretty much in every sense of the word. Stress has been linked to cancer. It's been linked to cardiovascular issues. It's been linked to making you age prematurely. I guess that's the reason why I have so much gray in my beard. Lots of stress. So what is stress? Stress is a response. That's what it really is. It's a response to environmental demands. And this can be as simple as need food that causes a physiological response for you to go out and seek food. You gotta do whatever you can to satiate that need. Now, a more technical kind of definition is it's a stimulus that challenges the body's homeostasis and triggers arousal. But stress is not only physiological, but it includes behavioral elements. And we go through a series of behaviors to reduce stress, or at least to attempt to. The problem is that stress doesn't kind of impact everybody evenly. You know, stressors affect people disproportionately. Have you ever known that guy that just nothing seems to bother him? Aren't they stressful? I'm kidding. They are the type of people that have just developed strong coping mechanisms to deal with environmental demands. I think one of those approaches of developing adaptive kind of coping strategies is their frame of mind. So there's this brilliant guy named Lazarus, right? And Lazarus, in the clinical literature of stress, nailed in on one part that's really important. Lazarus said that stress is kind of a relationship between the person and the environment. And when that person thinks about what resources they have available to them, and they judge that those resources are not sufficient to meet the needs of the environment, that person then becomes in danger of their sense of well-being being threatened. So what does that mean, conceptually? Well, I think the best way to kind of look at it is through the Stoic tradition, which are Greek philosophers, ancient Greek philosophers. And they've kind of said it best, kind of a folksy way of addressing it, is that men are not disturbed necessarily about the things that happen around them, but how they view them. Because stressors are not going to go away. Stressors are a part of life. They are environmental demands. You have physical, emotional stressors all the time. When somebody asks something from you, that's a stressor, in the sense that it challenges whatever resources you have available to you at the moment to navigate that demand. So let's talk about some really sticky ones. The ones that are probably the most frequent in life are daily hassles. That's what the psychs call them. Daily hassles. Now, daily hassles are the events such as traffic. Just the everyday kind of interactions can have a cumulative effect on your psychological health. And this is what I mean by cumulative effect. All right. So you get up one morning, you go into work, and you jump in the car, you head down the street, traffic. No big deal. Matter of fact, it's the same routine that you normally have. Let's do another scenario. Let's run a different thought experiment. You wake up. Ooh, you overslept. Stressor number one. You're running to get everything done before you run out the door. And so then you get in the car. You start heading down the street. Boom, traffic. But it's not the normal traffic. No, it's some knucklehead has ran out of gas right in the middle of the road. So it's just gumming up the works. So that puts you even further behind. But what it really does is make you feel even more stressed, because this is another demand of the environment on top of the demand of the environment that you already had with oversleeping. And so this sense of arousal that's connected to the stress response kind of ratchets up the temperature or the tension within the system, right? There's even more anxiety attached to it. Because then you start saying things like, if one more thing happens today, well, guess what? That is inevitable. One more thing is going to happen today. And if you're kind of anticipating it as further justification of how terrible this day is going to be, guess what? That's exactly, you're going to find the evidence that you need to support that claim. So whenever one kind of appraises or perceives stress in particularly negative ways, it's even worse than just the normal cumulative stress that we all kind of have to navigate. Now, whenever people tend to adopt a mindset towards stress that's kind of more defeatist in nature, when they view it as more threatening to their life, there's a whole host of new negative outcomes that get introduced. For example, depression. We have this depressive mind state that we see a lot within people who suffer from depression. They tend to have a negative appraisal type of things that happen in daily life. And this is what I mean. When people who endorse depressive mindsets, people who kind of embody those, when something challenging happens in their day, they evaluate it as some personal defect, some personal issue that they can't escape. This is what I mean, right? So let's just use something that we've all probably experienced. Everybody has done poorly on a test. Everyone has. I don't care who you are, because it's subjective. So if you're used to getting 100 and then you get an 89, oh my God, you did poorly, right? To you. I mean, there's other people that an 89, that's the win. So yet again, it's an appraisal. But a person who doesn't do well, they don't perform as well on some academic test, you can look at it one of two ways. You can look at it and say, I'm stupid. I am not good at this. I am a failure. Because I failed, therefore I am a failure. Opposite perspective is this. I had a setback. I didn't do as well as I would have liked to. I can work harder. I can do better. People who are depressed tend to take the perspective of the first that I described. It's stuck with them. They are the problem. It was not something that was temporary. It's some fixed issue that resides with them that they can do nothing to escape it. It's kind of the idea of self-efficacy. Do you have the ability to meet demands from the environment? People who are depressed often say no, they don't. There's nothing they can do about it. People who are not depressed tend to see things as transient, that they're more temporary conditions, that they can do things to make things better. That's how important stress and managing your stress is, because none of this happens overnight. It's kind of like a frog in a pot. If you're familiar with the analogy, you say, well, at least they say, I don't know of anybody who's actually attempted this experiment, but if you put a frog into a pot of water, it won't jump out. Then you put it on heat, and the water will sit there and incrementally get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter to the point where it starts to boil, and the frog will not jump out of the pot because it slowly adapts to the amount of heat in its environment. So because the frog just did not realize the temperature change across time, it did not realize it at the peril in which it was in. So what do we do about stress? What do we do? I think the first thing we can do is kind of meditate. I guess that's the best way to think of it. Think about how we are viewing ourselves and the world in the future. If we can explore, what are my patterns? Am I, it's okay, I can handle this? Or am I, oh my God, this is happening again type? Because if you're I can handle this, your stress response is going to ratchet down. But if you're oh my God, this is happening again, your physiological response is going to ramp up. And so the brain doesn't know the difference between fleeing from an existential crisis, like a lion chasing you, and a psychological stressor. It appraises it physiologically the same. So once the threat has been detected from the environment, the body goes into response. Your heart rate starts to increase. Cortisol, which is this nasty little stress hormone, starts to get dumped into the bloodstream and carried all over, right? And then, of course, it has neurological effects as well, because cortisol, once it makes its way through, also is supposed to get up to the brain and be processed out by the brain. And what it's supposed to be processed out by is the hippocampus, which is kind of really tied to memory. And so the more cortisol you have, the less effective the hippocampus is in pulling it out of the bloodstream, and the hippocampus can be affected. Your ability to recall events, your memory, starts to become challenged because of the level of stress and the physiological effect. That's why when we're stressed and we're asked to remember something, we have trouble doing it. So what do? How do we change the way we think about things? Well, I think if we used the same strategy that we did with anger, that can also be effective. So whenever some stressor enters into your life, if you can take a couple of minutes and use that same strategy of pulling out a piece of paper, drawing down the middle, and writing on the left side all of the, let's just call them catastrophic thoughts that you have. And then on the right side, try to create a more nuanced version of those catastrophic thoughts. A friend of mine, it's been a long time mentor of mine. She has helped me in times which I've been particularly stressed in this very kind of intuitive way. She'll ask me, okay, so what's best case scenario? What's worst case scenario? And then what is most likely? Brilliant and simple. What a simple little task like that does is it makes you split your attention between catastrophizing everything and then looking for optimistic outcomes. Then you run a probability of which is more likely to happen. And you'll find that most of the time it's somewhere in the middle, right? And somewhere in the middle is a lot more easy to live with. Why wouldn't it be? But it's a brilliant approach because it calms me right down. So if you can do that for yourself, or if you can elicit support from others, tell them, hey, whenever I'm freaking out about something, ask me these 3 things. Now, of course, exercising and eating right and getting enough sleep, all of those things impact your ability to respond to stress and to appraise stress or to evaluate stress in more helpful ways. Because if you're not sleeping, at least you're not getting adequate good sleep, your view of things is already going to be taxed because you're cranky, you're tired, of course. Then if you're eating like things that are also not nutritious foods, like you're shoveling Big Macs down and your body's having to work extra hard to pull out the nutrients that it needs to function, it's going to also make it worse. So just kind of conceptualize this as like your stress hygiene. Stress hygiene in a nutshell. Get rest, get sleep, eat right, and do things to take care of yourself. Invest back into yourself. Because listen, life is going to take from you the resources that you have available. Doing those simple things, sleeping enough, getting the right kind of food, and taking time and doing activities that help recharge you are the things that restore your battery. Now, if you're in the middle of a crisis, or if you're in the middle of a psychological demand, maybe not so much to the point of a crisis. Ask yourself, what's the best case? What's the worst case? What's most likely? If that's challenging for you and you don't have the ability to do that, which is fine. These are skills that take practice to achieve. Go back to the paper, draw a line, and turn your frontal lobes back on, the way we spoke about with anger issues. Just shift your mind frame at the moment. So this episode was my request. If there are issues or topics that you would like to have covered here on Vet with a Mic, please reach out to me. Let me know what they are. Don't let yourself struggle with a particular issue. Not to say that the person who requested this was struggling, but reach out. Let me know what you want to hear about. Anyway, as always, however life finds you, I hope life finds you well. Till next time.